Harsh laughter sliced through the hot California air, the kind of mean sound that made people avoid eye contact, pretending not to hear. It bounced around the grinder, a famous concrete training area where countless Navy SEAL hopefuls had either given up or become incredibly strong. Today, however, the grinder wasn't training future fighters. It was open day at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado. The large outdoor area was buzzing with a strange mix of guests, company reps hoping for big contracts, military families, limited access reporters, and curious public members wanting a peek at where America's top special forces were made. 53 people to be exact. Ivy Harper had counted them without trying, an old habit she couldn't break, noticing exits, sight lines, and possible dangers. The west fence had 2 ways out. The main building had 4 accessible doors. The combat practice area to the north was partly hidden by temporary seats set up for the day's shows, but none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the man standing 3 feet away, blocking the sun with shoulders like carved stone and an ego twice as big. Useless, Brick Lawson declared, not just saying the word but performing it, turning to his 4 friends with a dramatic wave, inviting them to share his disdain. That's the only way to describe her. Look at this. 5 feet tall, probably weighs as much as my morning protein shake, and she's standing here like she belongs. Ivy said nothing. She simply stood in her staff uniform, khaki pants, a dark blue shirt with naval support staff stitched over the heart, and comfortable, worn-out sneakers. The plastic water tray in her hands was starting to get wet in the afternoon heat, drops running onto her fingers. All around her, the brutal California sun turned the concrete into a cooking surface and made the distant ocean shimmer like melted metal. She was 5 feet, 4 inches tall, 118 pounds, 28 years old, with features that made people think she was younger. It made them underestimate her. It made them see exactly what she wanted them to see. A small woman with ordinary looks doing a forgotten job. The tray shook slightly in her grip, not from fear, never from fear, but from the effort of staying still, of keeping up the act she'd worn for 3 months. You know what this place is, Brick continued, spreading his arms wide to take in the grinder, the obstacle course, the distant buildings where legends were created. His shirt, dark gray with the Blackstone Security Solutions logo on the chest, stretched tight over his tooth. This is where America's best are made. And you, he looked her up and down, his lip curling. You're just the water girl. Behind Brick, his 4 partners stood like a wolf pack, eyeing easy prey. Flynn Mercer stood to his left, a thin man with a constant smirk and quick, darting eye. Gray Mitchell took the right side, thick-necked and slow-moving, but dangerous in a deliberate way. Derek Cole hung back a bit, older than the others, with the worn look of someone who'd seen real fighting before office jobs claimed him. And at the back, Hugo Wells, the oldest of the group, with graying hair, watched everything with an expression Ivy couldn't quite read. 53 witnesses, and not one of them moved to help. In a corner of the grinder, partly shaded by a shed, a man with graying hair sat on a gear crate, pretending to look at papers on a tablet. Chief Petty Officer Samuel Drake had been with Naval Special Warfare for 20. He'd seen trainees break during Hell Week, watched men find strength they didn't know they had, and stood at too many memorial services for friends who hadn't come home. Right now his attention wasn't on the papers, it was on the small woman with the water tray. Something about her bothered him. It had bothered him since she'd started at the canteen 3 months ago. The way she moved, efficient and purposeful, never a wasted step. The way her eyes scanned every room she entered, noticing details faster than conscious thought. The way she folded napkins into perfect military squares without seeming to realize it. Small things, unimportant things, things that only someone with Drake's experience would notice. He watched as Brick Lawson continued his show, and a cold feeling settled in his stomach. Not concern for the water girl, she seemed remarkably calm for someone being publicly shamed. Instead, a growing certainty that he was watching a situation headed for an unexpected outcome. Ivy slowly lowered the water tray to the folding table beside her. Her movements were calm, deliberate, each action perfectly controlled, her muscles working in smooth sync. She looked up at Brick Lawson and said nothing, and somehow that silence angered the contractor more than any sharp reply could have. The tension that spread through the watching crowd went unnoticed by most, but Drake caught it. He saw the slight change in the young woman's stance. Her feet spread a little, her weight shifted to the balls of her feet, her shoulders dropped almost without being noticed into a more ready position. He'd seen that adjustment before, hundreds of times in men and women getting ready for a fight without thinking about it. The question was, where had a canteen worker learned it? Drake put down his tablet and watched more carefully. In the next 20 minutes, everyone at this training center would learn just how wrong they had been. The fight had started over something as simple as a wrong turn. Ivy had been walking across the grinder with her third water delivery of the afternoon, moving through the crowd watching a rope climb demonstration, when Brick Lawson and his Blackstone security friends stepped directly into her path. Later witnesses would argue whether it was planned, whether Brick had seen the small woman coming and purposely blocked her way, or if it was just a coincidence that his huge body stopped her exactly when she needed to pass. The result was the same either way. Ivy had stopped short to avoid hitting him. The sudden halt made water bottles clink together on her tray. Brick had turned, already annoyed about something, maybe a failed deal, or the hit to his ego from watching real operators show skills he would never have, and found an easy target for his frustration. "Watch where you're going," he'd said first, which was fair, but then his eyes had moved over her, taking in the staff uniform, the water tray, the ordinary appearance, and something had changed in his expression: contempt. The particular scorn of a man who measured worth by muscle size and job titles, who divided the world into those who mattered and those who didn't. Ivy had apologized softly, without emotion, the kind of apology that should have ended the interaction. It did. Now 5 minutes later she stood surrounded by 5 contractors while the open-day crowd pretended not to notice, their discomfort showing in averted eyes and suddenly interesting things to look at elsewhere. "You know what your problem is?" Flynn Mercer stepped closer, his thin body almost vibrating with the energy of a man who'd found someone even lower on the perceived pecking order. "You don't know your place. Little girls like you think showing up and handing out water bottles makes you part of something." He gestured at the training facilities around them. The obstacle course where SEAL hopefuls were pushed to their limits, the combat training areas where future SEALs learned the art of war. "This is sacred ground. You're just background noise." Ivy's expression didn't change. Background. She'd been called worse. She'd been called nothing at all. Her existence erased from official records. Her missions removed from history. Her sacrifices kept secret at levels these men couldn't imagine. "Come on," Gray Mitchell rumbled, his thick neck turning as he looked at the crowd with the smugness of a man who knew no one would interfere. "Say something, or are you too dumb to talk?" 30 feet away, a group of SEAL trainees in their brown shirts had paused their move toward the obstacle course. Among them, Petty Officer Caleb Reed watched the confrontation with growing worry. He was 3 days into Hell Week, running on 4 hours of sleep over the past 72 hours, and every part of him screamed to keep moving, to focus on surviving, to not get instructors' attention for any reason. But something about the scene bothered him beyond the obvious unfairness. The woman wasn't reacting the way civilians reacted. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging, wasn't showing any of the usual signs of upset that came with public humiliation. She was simply still, the kind of stillness he'd only seen in instructors and combat veterans, the kind of stillness that came before action. "Miss?" A new voice cut through the tension. Tommy Reeves, the other canteen worker on duty today, had approached from the refreshment station, his Marine Corps tattoo visible under his rolled-up sleeve. At 34, Tommy had done 2 tours in Afghanistan as an infantry sergeant before an IED took partial hearing in his left ear and ended his military career. Now he poured coffee and handed out sandwiches, and most days he was at peace with that. Today wasn't most days. "You need help?" he asked Ivy, standing at the edge of the circle, not quite challenging the contractors, but making his presence known. Ivy's eyes met his for just a moment, the slightest shake of her head. Tommy hesitated. Every instinct from his Marine training told him to step in, to stand by a coworker being harassed, to uphold the basic respect that every person deserved, uniform or not. But something in that head shake stopped him. Not fear. He could recognize fear, and that wasn't it. Something else. A message he couldn't quite understand. He stepped back but didn't leave, taking a spot 10 feet away with arms crossed and eyes watching. "Oh, look at that," Brick laughed. "He thinks he's the cavalry." He'd noticed Tommy's slight tilt of his right ear, the way the former Marine turned his head to make up for it. Couple of rejects sticking together. That's sweet. That's real sweet. The insult rolled off Tommy easily from long practice. He'd heard worse during his years in service, usually from drill instructors who'd have eaten Brick Lawson for breakfast. But his jaw tightened, and his eyes never left Ivy. Across the grinder, Chief Petty Officer Drake had risen from his gear crate and was walking slowly toward the scene, his approach calm but determined. Years of training had taught him when to let situations sort themselves out, and when to step in, and this one was reaching that point. But something made him slow his pace, something about the way the water girl stood, the angle of her feet, the position of her hands after she'd set down the tray. He knew that stance, knew it well, had taught it to hundreds of trainees, had used it himself in combat situations over 3 decades and 4 continents. That wasn't the stance of a canteen worker, that was the stance of someone trained to kill. He stopped walking and watched, suddenly very interested in what would happen next. Derek Cole was the first of the Blackstone group to notice something was off. At 47 he was the most experienced of the contractors, with 15 years as an Army Ranger before moving to private security. He'd worked in 14 countries, been shot twice, and had developed an instinct for danger that had kept him alive in situations that had killed better men. That instinct was buzzing now. "Brick," he said quietly, trying to get his colleague's attention without being obvious. "Maybe we should. Maybe we should." "What?" Brick didn't bother lowering his voice. "Move on? Let Miss Water Bottle here go about her business?" He stepped closer to Ivy, using his height to tower over her. "I don't think so. She owes me an apology for getting in my way, and I'm going to get one." "Apologize?" Flynn echoed, enjoying the show. "On your knees would be appropriate. Show some respect for your betters." The crowd had grown quieter. Even the most determinedly oblivious onlookers were now watching. The uncomfortable silence of witnesses who sensed something wrong but weren't willing to act. Phones had started appearing in hands, not to call for help but to record. The urge to document had replaced the urge to intervene somewhere in the past 10 years, and Ivy noticed it without judgment. Let them record. Let them capture every moment of what these men chose to be. Before we continue, if you're loving this story of hidden strength and amazing revelations, take a second to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Over 90% of you watching aren't subscribed yet, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Ivy finally shows everyone who she really is. The moment that's coming will absolutely shock you. Subscribe now, stay with me, and let's see this through together. Commander Raymond Collins had been enjoying what he considered a successful open training day. The public relations value of these events couldn't be overstated, making the Navy community seem more human, building support among civilians and potential recruits, strengthening ties with the contractor community that provided valuable help. Now making his way back from a facility tour with a group of government staff, he found a disturbance that threatened to ruin all of it. He saw the group of Blackstone contractors first, their company shirts making them easy to spot. Then he saw the small woman at the center of their attention, recognized the canteen uniform, and felt a familiar tiredness settle over him. Harassment situations were sadly common when testosterone-filled contractors mixed with support staff, and he had dealt with more than his share over the years. Standard procedure would be to step in right away, separate the parties, file a report, but the government staff were still with him, and causing a scene would create exactly the kind of attention he was trying to avoid. Better to let security handle it. Better. He stopped walking, a frown on his face. The woman wasn't acting like a victim of harassment. No tears, no visible distress, no calls for help. She was simply standing there perfectly still, watching her tormentors with an expression he couldn't quite read. And Brick Lawson, apparently not satisfied with just yelling, had just grabbed the front of her uniform shirt. Time slowed down. In the frozen moment before action, Ivy took stock. 5 threats, though only Brick was close enough to touch. 53 witnesses, most with phones now recording. Many Navy personnel watching, including the Master Chief who'd been keeping an eye on her for the past 3 months, and the commander who'd just arrived.
Optimal response strategy: neutralize the immediate threat without serious injury. Keep other risks low. Keep her cover if possible. Her training had prepared her for this calculation. Thousands of hours of close-quarters combat instruction, hundreds of real-world uses, the cold math of violence that lived in her muscle memory like a second heartbeat. But she wasn't ready to reveal herself. Not yet. Not when she was so close to finding what she'd come here for. "Let go," she said quietly. Her first words since the confrontation began. Brick laughed. Actually laughed. A harsh bark of disbelief. "Or what? Water girl? You going to cry? Going to scream for help?" His grip tightened, crumpling the fabric of her uniform, pulling her slightly forward and off balance. "I've been in more war zones than you've had hot dinners. I've killed men with my bare hands, and you think you can tell me what to do?" Behind him, Derek Cole's unease had grown into real alarm. Something was wrong here. His instincts screamed, but he couldn't tell what. The woman was too calm, too composed. Nobody being physically threatened by a man twice their size stayed that relaxed. Unless they weren't actually being threatened. Unless they were the threat. "Brick," he said more urgently. "Let her go now." "Shut up, Derek." Brick didn't even look at him. His attention was fixed on Ivy, waiting for the fear response that should have come. That always came when he used his size to intimidate. "I want to hear her beg. I want her to understand that people like her exist to serve people like me. That's the natural order. That's how the world works." Ivy's eyes met his, and in that moment, something shifted. It was so subtle that only those watching most closely would notice. A change in her stillness, a hardening of something behind her gaze. The difference between a rabbit frozen in fear and a predator deciding if prey was worth the effort. "The natural order," she repeated softly. "You want to talk about the natural order?" "That's right." Brick grinned, mistaking her tone for giving in. "Finally getting it through your thick skull. The natural order is that the strong take what they want and the weak serve." Her voice remained quiet, almost like a normal conversation. "That's what you believe. Now you're learning. I learned that lesson a long time ago." Still quiet. Still calm. "The problem is you don't know what strength looks like." The words hung in the air like a dare. Flynn Mercer laughed nervously. Gray Mitchell shifted his weight, suddenly Hugo Wells at the back of the group had gone very still, the stillness of a man who was starting to suspect he'd greatly misjudged a situation. Chief Petty Officer Drake had stopped pretending to be a casual observer. He'd moved to within 20 feet of the confrontation, close enough to see details, close enough to step in if needed, but something held him back. Something told him that help wouldn't be needed, not for the reason he had first. He watched the small woman's hands, watched them hang loose at her sides, fingers relaxed, ready. Hands like that didn't belong to canteen workers. Brick Lawson, unaware of the changing dynamics around him, tightened his grip on Ivy's shirt and pulled her close. His face was inches from hers now, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, see the broken veins in his cheeks that spoke of too much drinking, too much ego, too many years believing he was more than he was. "What did you just say to me?" he asked, low and dangerous. Or at least what Brick thought was dangerous. "Did you just talk back to me?" "I said, you don't know what strength looks like." Ivy's voice hadn't changed. "You think it's muscles? You think it's intimidation? You think it's making smaller people afraid? And what do you think it is?" The smile that crossed Ivy's face was small and cold. "Strength is control. Strength is choosing not to destroy someone when you easily could. Strength is..." Because Brick Lawson, finally recognizing something in her tone that his ego refused to accept, made a decision that would change everything. He shoved her, not a light push, a real shove with his full body weight behind it, the kind of force that should have sent a low 118-pound woman sprawling across the concrete. Should have. Instead, something happened that Brick's brain couldn't understand. Ivy moved, not the stumbling backward he'd expected. Something else. Her weight shifted as his hands made contact, sending his force through her body and into the ground. Her feet adjusted, finding stability where there should have been none. His shove, which should have launched her 6 feet backward, barely moved her at all. She stood exactly where she'd been, steady as a tree, with deep roots. And Brick Lawson, who had been leaning into the push with all his weight, suddenly found himself off balance with nothing to push against. The silence that followed was absolute. Did you? Brick's voice came out wrong, confused and unsure. How did you? You overextended. Ivy's tone was almost like a lesson. When you push someone, you move your balance point forward. If they're not there to receive it, you're vulnerable. 20 feet away, Chief Petty Officer Drake's suspicions turned into certainty. That hadn't been an accident. That had been a perfect show of force redirection. A technique taught in special close quarters combat programs. The kind of programs that didn't exist for civilians. The kind of programs that left specific signs in how a person moved and reacted. He'd seen that exact technique before. He'd taught that exact technique before to SEAL trainees in Phase 3, to operators preparing for top assignment,
to the handful of women who'd been quietly integrated into special operations programs over the past decade, despite what official policy said was or wasn't happening. His hand moved to the radio on his belt. Not yet. Not until he was sure, but he was becoming very sure. The crowd's attention had sharpened from uncomfortable interest to genuine fascination. Whatever they had expected from this confrontation, it wasn't what they were seeing. Phones that had been recording casually were now held up on purpose, capturing the strange scene, the massive contractor, clearly confused, and the small woman who hadn't moved an inch. Brick recovered quickly, or tried to. His ego wouldn't allow the moment to go unchallenged. "Lucky," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "You got lucky, did I?" "Gray." He gestured without looking at his colleague. "Give me the rifle." Gray Mitchell hesitated. They weren't supposed to handle weapons during open training day. The firearms present were strictly for demonstration by qualified Navy personnel. But an unloaded M4 carbine sat on a nearby display table, part of an equipment showcase, and Brick's meaning was clear. "Brick, this isn't a good idea." Derek Cole again, his alarm now openly visible. "Something's not right here. Let's just..." "The rifle." Brick's voice allowed no argument. Gray got the M4, checked it was unloaded, magazine removed, chamber clear, and handed it to Brick with clear reluctance. Commander Collins, watching from 20 feet away, would have stepped in under normal circumstances, but something held him in place. A growing curiosity overriding his usual instincts. He wanted to see where this went. He would regret that decision later. Or perhaps not. Brick held the M4 like a man who'd had training but had let it get rusty. Grip slightly wrong. Stance a few degrees off perfect. The thousand small clues that separated real operators from everyone else. He thrust the weapon toward Ivy, handle first. "Here." A sneer twisted his features. "Show me how to hold this. If you even know which end the bullets come out of." The test was meant to humiliate. Most civilians had never handled a military rifle, and their clumsy attempts to hold one properly provided easy material for mockery. Brick expected uncertainty, awkwardness, the proof that this water girl was exactly what she appeared to be. He didn't expect what happened next. Ivy took the M4. Her hands found the grip with an ease that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Her fingers positioned themselves automatically, index finger extended along the receiver, thumb settling into its proper spot, left hand cradling the handguard with textbook precision. She held the weapon for exactly 2 seconds. Then she set it down on the display table, adjusted its position so the barrel pointed in a safe direction, and stepped back. "I know which end the bullets come from," she said quietly. The change in Derek Cole's expression was remarkable. His face went pale, then flushed, cycling through emotions too quickly to track. He'd spent 15 years around weapons, around people who lived and died by their ability to handle them under pressure. He knew what skill looked like. What Ivy had just shown wasn't skill, it was mastery. "Where?" He couldn't finish the question. "Brick." Hugo Wells stepped forward, urgency in his voice. "We should go now." "Go." Brick stared at Ivy like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Did you see what she just did? Where did a water girl learn to hold a rifle like that?" "That's exactly why we should go." Hugo's eyes hadn't left Ivy, and there was something new in his expression, not contempt anymore. Something closer to recognition. "I've seen that grip before. I've seen that stance and in the people I saw it on." He trailed off, shaking his head. "We need to leave." But Brick Lawson had never been good at reading situations, at knowing when to cut his losses and walk away. That particular blindness, had cost him his army career. An assault charge against a female lieutenant who'd rejected his advances, reduced to misconduct, and administrative discharge through the help of connections and expensive lawyers. He didn't walk away. He never walked away. No, he grabbed the M4 back from the table, turned to Ivy with renewed aggression. I don't know where you learned that, but it doesn't change anything. You're still nobody, still nothing, still Brick. Derek Cole's voice cracked like a whip. Look at her. The instructions stopped Brick mid-sentence. He looked. Ivy's hands hung at her sides, relaxed. Ready, but that wasn't what Derek was pointing at. It was the scars. In the struggle moments before, in the confusion of Brick's failed shove, Ivy's left sleeve had ridden up, and there on the inside of her forearm, a pattern of scarring was visible. Distinctive marks that anyone with military experience would recognize. Shrapnel scarring. The kind you got when an improvised explosive device exploded nearby and turned everyday objects into supersonic projectiles. The kind you only got in war zones. Caleb Reed, watching from 20 feet away with his Hell Week group, felt his heart rate jump. He'd studied those scar patterns in his pre-SEAL training, learned to recognize the different signs of different explosive types. What he was seeing on the water girl's arm wasn't from any civilian accident. That was combat scarring, severe enough to have required multiple surgeries. Judging by the overlapping tissue, severe enough to have ended most people's military career. But she was using that arm with complete function, which meant extensive recovery, which meant, who are you? The question came from Flynn Mercer, his earlier bravery gone, replaced by genuine confusion. Ivy tugged her sleeve down, covering the scars. I'm the water girl, she said evenly. Isn't that what you called me? Nobody who works in a canteen has scars like that. Derek's voice had gone flat, the tone of a man rethinking every assumption he'd made. Nobody civilian has hands like yours. Nobody untrained moves the way you just moved. You're mistaken. I'm not. He took a step back, creating distance between himself and her. I've worked with enough operators to know what they look like, what they move like. And you. He shook his head. I don't know what you are, but you're not a water girl. Chief Petty Officer Drake had heard enough. He closed the remaining distance, not rushing but not slow either, and stepped into the circle of confrontation with the easy authority of a man who'd commanded elite fighters for decades. Is there a problem here? His voice carried the sharp neutrality of a formal question, but his eyes never left Ivy. Master Chief. Brick straightened unconsciously, military training kicking in despite his years out of uniform. No problem. Just having a conversation with the support staff. Looked like more than conversation from where I was standing. Drake's gaze moved from Brick to Ivy, evaluating. Miss, are you all right? I'm fine, Master Chief. Ivy's voice remained even. Controlled. Thank you. These men were harassing you. It's not the first time someone's underestimated me. A brief pause. It won't be the last. Drake studied her face, looking for something he couldn't quite name. I've been watching you for a while now, he said quietly, lowering his voice so only she would hear. 3 months since you started at the canteen. Ivy's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Recognition that her cover wasn't as perfect as she'd believed. You fold your napkins in military squares, Drake continued. You count every person in every room you enter. You check exits before you check anything else. When you walk, you make no unnecessary noise. When you stand, you favor your left leg slightly. An old injury, probably related to those scars on your arm. He paused. And just now you demonstrated weapon handling that exceeds most of my Phase 3 trainees. I took some classes. The deflection was weak, and they both knew it. What classes teach force redirection techniques from our top-tier close-quarters combat curriculum? No answer. Drake nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. I don't know who you are, he said. I ran your name through every database I have access to, and Ivy Harper comes up clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that only happens when someone with serious clearance has scrubbed a file. Still no response, but Ivy's stillness had changed again, not relaxed anymore but coiled. Ready. I'm not going to push, Drake said. Not here, not now. Whatever you're doing at this training center, whatever you're looking for,
That's your business. He straightened, raising his voice to normal volume. But these contractors are done bothering you. Understood? He turned to face Brick Lawson and his partners, and his voice dropped to something cold and harsh. You five, leave now. If I see you anywhere near support staff for the rest of this event, I will personally make sure that Blackstone Security Solutions never receives another contract with Naval Special Warfare. Am I clear? Brick's face went red. Now, wait just a minute. We're guests here. We have every right to. You have the right to leave peacefully or be escorted out by security. Drake didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Those are your options. Choose. The staring contest lasted 3 seconds. Then Brick's eyes dropped. Not much, not obviously, but the alpha male who had been terrorizing a water girl couldn't maintain eye contact with a real warrior. Fine, he spat the word. We're done here anyway. Nothing worth staying for. He turned, signaling his partners with a jerk of his head. Let's go. This whole place is a waste of time. They left. Not quickly. Brick's pride wouldn't allow that, decisively. Flynn Mercer shot Ivy a confused look as he passed. Gray Mitchell kept his eyes forward. Derek Cole paused, opened his mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it, and followed the other. Hugo Wells was the last to go. He stopped in front of Ivy, studying her face with an intensity that seemed different from his earlier mockery. I know I've seen you before, he said quietly, or someone like you. In Afghanistan, 2017, there was a woman. They called her Phantom. His eyes searched her face. She saved my entire squad when our base was overrun. Just appeared out of nowhere, guided us to safety, then vanished. Command said she didn't exist, said we imagined it. Ivy said nothing. I didn't imagine it. Hugo's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And I never forgot that face. He walked away, leaving Ivy standing alone on the grinder, the California sun beating down on her shoulders, and 53 witnesses pretending they hadn't seen anything unusual at all. Chief Petty Officer Drake remained. Phantom, he said softly. I've heard that call sign before. Rumors mostly. Ghost stories operators tell each other about missions that officially never happened. He paused. There's a file in the War Command database classified so high that even I can't access it. The only name associated with it is Phantom. Ivy met his eyes. I'm just a water girl, Master Chief. No, Drake shook his head slowly. You're not. But I'm willing to let you keep pretending for now. Just remember that some of us see more than others. And some secrets don't stay buried forever. He walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the distant sound of waves crashing against the Coronado shore. Ivy Harper, the woman who didn't exist, the ghost who had returned from the dead, the operator whose missions would never be acknowledged, bent down and picked up her water tray. She had work to do. The next 2 hours passed almost normally. Ivy returned to her duties, giving water bottles to thirsty visitors, refilling ice bins, keeping up the act that she was exactly what she appeared to be. The confrontation with Brick Lawson became one of those stories that spread through a crowd and then faded. Interesting enough to discuss, not dramatic enough to report, but things had changed. She could feel it in the way people looked at her now. The side glances and whispered conversations. The SEAL trainees she served water to studied her with new curiosity. The instructors who dismissed her as background now tracked her movements with subtle attention. Most of all, Chief Petty Officer Drake watched, not obviously, not intrusively, but consistently. He'd set himself up at a table near the refreshment area, pretending to review training schedules on his tablet, and his presence felt like a question she wasn't ready to answer. Tommy Reeves worked alongside her in unusual silence. 3 times he started to say something, and 3 times he stopped. Finally, during a quiet moment between visitors, he spoke. That thing you did. He kept his voice low, arranging cups on the service table without looking at her. The redirection. I learned something similar in Marine combat training, but it took me 6 months to even get close to that smooth. Ivy said nothing. You're not canteen staff. It wasn't a question. I don't know what you are, but it's not that. Tommy, I'm not going to push. He held up a hand. Whatever you're doing here, whatever you're looking for, that's your business. But I want you to know, he hesitated. My brother Noah, he was special ops. Something secret, something he couldn't talk about. He died in Syria 3 years ago, or so they told us. Body never found. Ivy went still. Sometimes, Tommy continued, his voice rough with old grief. I think about the people he might have worked with. Operators like him doing things the rest of us never hear about. And I wonder if any of them survived. Would they tell me what really happened? Would they let me know how he spent his final moments? The weight of what she knew but couldn't tell him, not yet settled on Ivy's shoulders like a physical burden. Tommy, she said quietly, Noah's call sign. Do you know what it was? His head snapped toward. How do you know he had a call sign? Do you know it? A pause. They never told us officially, but one of his buddies at the memorial service, he was drunk enough to talk, said they called Noah Shepherd. Tommy's voice cracked, because he was always looking out for the flock, always putting his team first. Shepherd. The name hit Ivy like a physical blow, though she didn't let it 3 years of searching, 3 months of working at this canteen, and finally confirmation of what she'd suspected. Noah Reeves, Shepherd, her teammate on Operation Neptune's Shadow, the man she'd watched disappear into a collapsing building in Syria, the man whose death had haunted her nightmares for 3 years, the man she had reason to believe was still alive. Tommy, she said, and something in her voice made him turn fully to face her. This isn't the time or place, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Trust you. I don't even know who you are. You know more than you think. She met his eyes. You know I'm not what I appear to be. You know I handled a situation today that should have overwhelmed me. You know, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You know that people who do the kind of work your brother did, we don't always stay dead when we're supposed to. Tommy's face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying I need more time. I'm saying I came here looking for information and I'm close to finding it. I'm saying, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm saying I knew Noah, and I don't think the story you were told was complete. Before he could respond, before the enormity of her words could fully register, the relative peace of the afternoon shattered. Brick Lawson was back. He'd returned with his 4 partners, but something had changed. His earlier mockery had turned into something darker. The wounded pride of a man who'd been shamed in public and couldn't let it go. He'd spent the past 2 hours stewing in that humiliation, replaying the confrontation, convincing himself that he had been cheated somehow, that there had to be an explanation that preserved his self-image. Now he stood at the edge of the refreshment area, blocking the main path, and his eyes were fixed on Ivy with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Thought you could make a fool of me, his voice carried across the space, drawing attention from everyone within 50. Thought that little trick you pulled would just go unanswered. Chief Petty Officer Drake rose from his table. Commander Collins, who'd been chatting with a group of contractors near the obstacle course, looked up sharply. Brick. Derek Cole grabbed his partner's arm. This is insane. You need to stop. Brick shook him off. I did some asking around, he continued, ignoring Derek. Nobody here knows who you are. Nobody in the canteen supervisor chain has heard of an Ivy Harper. Your employment records are clean, but they're also thin. Too thin, like someone created them in a hurry. Ivy set down the water pitcher she was holding slowly, deliberately. I think you're a fake, Brick said. I think you're here under false pretenses, and I'm going to prove it one way or another. Tommy stepped forward, positioning himself between Brick and Ivy. I'm going to need you to back away. This is a staff area. Get out of my way. Brick didn't even look at him. This doesn't concern you. The word hit Tommy like a slap, but he didn't move. I said back away, and I said. Brick's hand shot out, shoving Tommy backward.
The former Marine stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden violence. He recovered quickly, training kicking in. But by then, Brick had moved past him toward Ivy. Let's see what you've got when you're not playing games. Brick's voice had dropped to something ugly and threatening. Let's see who you really are. We're about to reach the moment you've been waiting for. The reveal that's going to change everything. But first, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me what you think Ivy's real identity is. Former Marine, CIA operative, something else entirely. The answer is coming, and it's bigger than anything you've guessed. Smash that like button if you're as hooked as I am, and let's see who got closest. Now, back to the story, because what happens next will absolutely shock you. The crowd had formed again, larger this time. Word of the earlier confrontation had spread and spectators had positioned themselves for a better view. Phones were raised, recording. The atmosphere buzzed with that particular energy that came before violence. Anticipation mixed with dread. The primal brain's hunger for conflict wrestled with civilized discomfort. Ivy stood her ground as Brick approached. She could see Drake moving to intercept. Could see Commander Collins shouting something into his radio. Could see security personnel pushing through the crowd. They wouldn't arrive in time. The calculation was simple and automatic. She had perhaps 10 seconds before this situation reached a point of no return. 10 seconds to decide how far she was willing to go. "I'm going to give you one chance," she said, her voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "Walk away. Forget this happened. Go back to your life and pretend you never saw me." Brick laughed. "Are you threatening me? You little water girl wants to threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you a gift." Her eyes met his, and something in them made his laughter fade. "I'm giving you the chance to leave here with your pride intact. Because once you cross this line, there's no going back." "Cross what line?" He was 3 feet away now, too. "I'm not scared of you. Whatever trick you pulled earlier, it was a trick, a gimmick. In a real fight, I'd break you in half." "No." Ivy's voice remained calm. "You wouldn't. Prove it." He was inches away now, towering over her. "Show me what you've got, water girl. Show me what." He grabbed her arm. In close quarters combat, there is a concept called action time versus reaction time. The basic truth is this: a defender who knows what's coming can respond faster than an attacker who's still deciding what to do. A trained operator who has practiced a specific response thousands of times can carry out that response before the conscious mind even notices the trigger. Ivy didn't think about what came next. She didn't need to. The moment Brick's hand closed on her arm, her body moved. 3 months of holding back, 3 years of suppressed training, a lifetime of preparation. All of it condensed into a sequence that lasted less than a second. She stepped inward, not away, directly into Brick's space, where his size became a disadvantage rather than a benefit. Her free hand came up, not to strike, but to control, finding the pressure point at the base of his thumb. Her hip shifted, loaded with coiled energy, and then in one smooth motion, she redirected. The technique was called the seal pup takedown, nicknamed by the DEVGRU instructors, who created it for smaller operators working against larger opponents. It used the attacker's momentum against them, turned their size from an asset into a weakness, and applied leverage at angles the human body wasn't designed to resist. Brick Lawson weighed 220 pounds. He had 15 years of combat training. He had worked in 6 countries and survived situations that would have killed lesser men. None of it mattered. His feet left the ground, his body spun, and before his brain could process what was happening, he was face down on the concrete, his right arm hyperextended behind his back in a hold that made every movement agony. The whole sequence took up 0.8 seconds. Silence. Complete, deafening silence. Ivy held the lock, applying just enough pressure to immobilize without hurting. Brick struggled once, twice, and each movement sent waves of pain through his trapped arm. He went still, breathing hard, his cheek pressed against the hot concrete. "That," Ivy said quietly, "was a warning. The next one won't be." She released him and stepped back. Brick scrambled to his feet, cradling his arm, his face a mask of shock and dawning fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he had no idea what to say. Behind him his partners had gone pale. Flynn Mercer looked like he might be sick. Gray Mitchell stood frozen, unable to understand what he'd witnessed. Derek Cole's expression was complex, horror mixed with something that might have been respect. Hugo Wells simply nodded, as if confirming something he'd suspected all along. But Ivy wasn't paying attention to any of them, because during the takedown, during the brief violence of Brick's fall, her uniform shirt had torn. Not much, just a small rip along the shoulder seam, where the fabric had caught and pulled. Enough to expose her left shoulder, enough to expose the tattoo. It was there for everyone to see. A golden trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs, but changed, different from the standard design. Inside the trident's crown sat a number 7, and below it,
in script so small you would have to be close to read it, a phrase, DEVGRU. The only easy day was yesterday. The trident of Team 7, SEAL Team 6, the most elite special operations unit in the American military. Operators who didn't officially exist, whose missions were classified at levels most people didn't know existed. And below the tattoo, crossing her collarbone like a badge of survival, the twisted scar tissue of shrapnel damage, the signature of an IED blast that would have killed anyone without exceptional armor and exceptional luck. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Chief Petty Officer Samuel Drake stepped forward, and his boots seemed incredibly loud in the silence. He walked until he stood directly in front of Ivy, his eyes fixed on the exposed tattoo with an expression that mixed shock, recognition, and something deep. "Ghost Unit 7, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Operation Neptune's Shadow. Syria." Ivy met his eyes, said nothing. "I trained with the operators on that mission," Drake continued. "Before they deployed, before they became ghosts." His voice caught. The team leader was a woman, first female to complete the integrated assessment program. They called her Phantom. Commander Collins had pushed through the crowd, his face pale. "Mother of Mercy, you're Phantom." The name rippled through the crowd. Phantom. Whispers that grew into murmurs that grew into exclamations. Even those who'd never heard the call sign understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The revealing of a secret that had been hidden in plain sight. Drake did something then that Ivy hadn't expected. He snapped to attention, full military posture, spine straight, shoulders back, chin high, and then he raised his right hand to his brow in a salute. Not casual, not brief, but the full formal gesture reserved for officers and heroes. "Lieutenant Commander Harper," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the silent grinder. "It is an honor." Around them, the ripple effect began. Other military personnel in the crowd, active duty, veterans, instructors, recognized what was happening and responded instinctively. One by one they came to attention. One by one, hands rose in salute. Caleb Reed, the Hell Week trainee, who had been watching everything, felt tears prick his eyes as he snapped his own salute. Around him, his fellow trainees followed suit. The Blackstone contractor stood paralyzed. Brick Lawson, still cradling his hyperextended arm, stared at Ivy with an expression of dawning horror. He'd assaulted a DEVGRU operator, a top-tier asset, a woman whose very existence was classified. His career was over. His freedom might be too. Ivy Harper, Phantom, stood in the center of the Coronado grinder, surrounded by saluting warriors, and felt the weight of her past settling onto her shoulders like a physical cloak. Her cover was blown. Her mission was compromised. Everything she'd worked toward for 3 months, the careful infiltration, the patient search for information, all of it unraveled by a torn shirt and an ego-driven contractor who couldn't leave well enough alone. But something else was happening too. Something she hadn't expected. She was being acknowledged, seen. After 3 years of hiding, 3 years of being officially dead, 3 years of carrying secrets that had nearly destroyed her, she was standing in the sunlight and being recognized for what she was, a warrior, a survivor, a legend. She returned the salute, crisp, precise, perfect, and felt something shift inside her. "At ease," she said, and her voice carried command easily. "All of you, at ease." The salutes dropped, but the attention remained. Commander Collins stepped forward, his face a study in conflicting emotion. "Lieutenant Commander Harper," he said, the rank feeling strange on his tongue. "I need to verify your identity through official channels. This is," he gestured helplessly at the chaos around them. "This is unprecedented." "I understand." Ivy's voice remained calm. "I have credentials, though they're not conventional, and there are things I need to tell you, things that can't wait for bureaucratic verification, such as..." Ivy glanced at the crowd, at the phones still recording, at the witnesses who were already turning what they'd seen into stories they'd tell for the rest of their lives. "Not here," she said. "Is there somewhere private we can speak? There's something I need to access in your classified database, and it's a matter of life and death." Collins studied her face, weighing options he'd never expected to face. Then he nodded. "My office, now." "Master Chief," Clear the area and get these contractors into custody. I want full statements from everyone who witnessed what happened here today. Yes, sir. Drake turned to the Blackstone group, and his expression promised nothing good. You five, you're coming with me, and I would strongly advise against running. Brick Lawson, who had been slowly backing away, stopped. His face had gone gray. I didn't know, he stammered. I had no idea who she was. You can't. This isn't fair. Fair. Drake stepped close enough that Brick had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. You assaulted a decorated operator, a woman who has done more for this country than you could accomplish in 10 lifetimes. You want to talk about fair? I'm entitled to a lawyer. You have the right to remain silent. Drake's smile was cold. I strongly suggest you exercise it. Security personnel arrived. Real security, not the small presence of open training day, but armed and serious. They surrounded the contractors with practiced efficiency, and the reality of the situation finally seemed to sink into Brick's denial. He was escorted away in handcuffs, followed by his partners. Flynn Mercer kept looking back at Ivy with an expression of stunned disbelief. Gray Mitchell walked with head bowed, saying nothing. Derek Cole went quietly, almost resignedly, like a man who'd known this moment was coming. Hugo Wells paused as he passed Ivy. Phantom, he said softly. I knew I remembered you. Afghanistan, FOB Sharana. You pulled us out when everyone else had written us off. I remember, Ivy said. Sergeant Wells, 3rd Platoon, 27th Infantry. You were the only one who kept your head when the perimeter collapsed. You saved 19 men that night. 19 men who got to go home to their families because of you. His eyes glistened. Whatever happens next, whatever you're here for, know that there are people who haven't forgotten. People who owe you everything. He was led away and Ivy watched him go with emotions she couldn't name. Then Commander Collins touched her elbow, gentle but firm. This way, he said. We have a lot to discuss. As they walked toward the command building, leaving the chaos of the grinder behind, Ivy allowed herself a single backward glance. Tommy Reeves stood where she'd left him, his face a mask of shock, hope, and desperate questions. Their eyes met across the distance. Later, she mouthed silently, I promise. He nodded once, and somehow that simple acknowledgement felt more important than all the salutes she'd received. Because Tommy wasn't saluting the legend. He was trusting the woman, and that Ivy realized, mattered more than she'd expected. The command building was climate-controlled, a welcome relief after the baking heat of the Coronado afternoon. Commander Collins led Ivy through corridors that required 3 separate security checkpoints, each one stricter than the last. At the final door, a reinforced steel barrier with biometric locks, he stopped. Before we go in, he said, I need to ask you something. Ivy waited. Why are you? The real reason. You could have access to any military facility in the country with your credentials, assuming your credentials check out, which I'm increasingly certain they will. Why this training center? Why the canteen? She considered the question, considered how much to reveal, how much to hold back. Because someone I thought was dead, might not be, she finally said, and the answers I need are in your classified database. Collins absorbed this. Someone from your unit, from Neptune's shadow. Yeah, the entire team was listed as killed in action. I read the summary report. What there was of it. Complete loss. No survivors. The report was wrong. Ivy met his eyes. I survived, and I have reason to believe I wasn't the only one. The implications hung in the air between them. If what you're saying is true, Collins shook his head slowly. The consequences would be enormous. American operators thought dead, possibly held somewhere. By whom? Why? That's what I'm trying to find out. Collins was silent for a long moment. Then he pressed his hand against the biometric panel and the door clicked open. Let's see what we can find, he said. The secure communications room was a testament to modern military technology. Multiple screens, encrypted terminals, direct lines to every major command center in the Department of Defense. Collins seated himself at the primary workstation and began typing access codes. I'm going to need a name, he said. Who are you looking for? Ivy had waited 3 years to say this name to someone who could help. 3 years of searching, 3 years of following shadows and dead ends, 3 years of refusing to accept what everyone else had accepted. Noah Reeves, she said, Sergeant First Class. Call sign Shep. He was my second in command on Neptune's Shadow. Collins typed the name into the search field. The system hummed. Processing. Accessing databases that existed in the spaces between official records. Then the results appeared. Reeves, Noah David SFC, USA DEVGRU. Date September 15th. Took. Location, redacted. Syria. Body not recovered. Disposition, classified level 7. Ivy stared at the screen. Not recovered, she said. That means they never found him. It means his remains were never identified. Collins correct. In the kind of situation that report describes, that's not unusual. Building collapse. Fire. Multiple casualties. Sometimes there's nothing left to find, or sometimes someone is removed from the site before the search teams arrive. Collins turned to look at her. That's a serious accusation. You're suggesting someone extracted a supposedly dead operator from a combat zone. Who would have the capability to do that? Who would have the motive? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find out. Ivy leaned closer to the screen. Can you access the satellite imagery from that date? From the time of the incident? That would be. Collins hesitated. That would require clearance. I don't have, but someone does. War Command maybe. Or higher. He ran a hand through his hair. You're asking me to request classified satellite imagery for a mission that officially doesn't exist, based on the theory that a dead operator might actually be alive. Do you understand how that's going to sound? I understand how it's going to sound. Ivy's voice was steady. I also understand that Noah Reeves was one of the best men I've ever served with. He had a brother who thinks he's dead, a mother who buried an empty coffin, a legacy that's been reduced to a star on a wall that no one can officially acknowledge. If there's even a chance he's alive, don't we owe it to him to find out? The question hung in the air. Collins looked at the screen, at the sparse official record of a life that had been lived in shadows. Then he looked at Ivy, the woman who shouldn't exist, who had walked into his training center disguised as a canteen worker, who had just ended one of the ugliest confrontations he had ever witnessed with skills that defied explanation.
I'll make some calls, he said finally. No promises, but I'll try. That's all I'm asking. In the meantime, he gestured at the door, I need you to stay on base. We're going to have a lot of questions, and until I can verify your identity through official channels, you're technically in a gray area. I understand. And Harper, he paused. Ivy, what you did today out there on the grinder, the restraint you showed. A lot of people wouldn't have stopped at just taking that man down. They would have hurt him. Really hurt him. Ivy thought of the red haze that had threatened to descend when Brick grabbed her arm. The whisper of old training that suggested how easy it would be to break instead of bend, to end instead of subdue. The goal was never to hurt anyone, she said. The goal was to find Noah. And now she looked at the classified screen, at the sparse data that represented 3 years of search. Now I'm closer than I've ever been. The door to the communications room opened, and Chief Petty Officer Drake entered. His expression was complicated, part urgency, part something that looked almost like wonder. Commander, he said, we have a situation. Collins stood. What kind of situation? The kind where you're going to want to take this call. Drake held up a satellite phone, military grade, encrypted, the kind used for communications that couldn't be abatisted. It's for her. He nodded at Ivy. The room went still. For me, Ivy's voice remained calm, but her heart rate had sped up. Who is it? He wouldn't identify himself, just said he needed to speak with Phantom. Drake's eyes met hers. He said to tell you that the shepherd is still tending his flock. The words hit Ivy like a physical blow. The shepherd is still tending his flock. The phrase Noah used to use, his private joke about his call sign, the way he'd describe his role as second in command. No one outside their unit would know that phrase. No one alive anyway. She took the phone with hands that she forced to remain steady, raised it to her ear. This is Phantom. Static. Then a voice. Male. Hoarse. Damaged in a way that spoke of years of hardship. Crackled through the encryption. Hello, Commander. Been a long time. Ivy's eyes closed. She knew that voice. Knew it like she knew her own heartbeat. Her own breathing. The rhythm of memories she'd carried for 3 years. Noah. The one and only. A pause filled with the ghost of what might have been a laugh. Or what's left of him anyway. They said you were dead. They said, I know what they said. His voice hardened. They were supposed to say that. Part of the deal. What deal? Noah, where are you? What happened? Static surged, threatening to swallow his words. When his voice returned, it was urgent. Listen to me. I don't have much time. They're monitoring everything, and I only have a small window before they realize I've accessed outside channels. Who's monitoring? Where are you being held? Yemen, Sector 7. There's a facility. More static. But it's not what you think, Ivy. It's not the enemy holding me here. It's... The signal degraded, his voice breaking up into digital noise. Noah. Noah. One last burst of clarity, and his words came through with devastating precision. They're not terrorists, Ivy. They're Americans. They're our own people. The line went dead. Ivy stood frozen, the satellite phone pressed to her ear, listening to the empty hiss of a severed connection. Americans. Our own people. The implications spread outward like shockwaves from an explosion. If Noah was telling the truth, and she had no reason to doubt him, then he hadn't been captured by enemies. He'd been taken by his own country, hidden away in a secret site that officially didn't exist for reasons that someone, somewhere, had decided were worth sacrificing a hero. Harper. Collins's voice seemed to come from very far away. What did he say? She lowered the phone, looked at the commander with eyes that had gone cold and hard. He's alive, she said. Noah's alive, and he's being held prisoner by Americans. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Ivy Harper, the ghost who had returned from the dead, squared her shoulders and made a decision. I need a team, she said, and I need access to everything you have on black sites in Yemen. Because I'm going to get him back. Collins stared at her. You're talking about unauthorized military action in a foreign country. That's exactly what they trained me for. Her voice was iron. And Commander, one more thing. What? The smile that crossed her face was cold and certain, the expression of a hunter who had finally caught the scent of her prey. I'm not the only ghost who came back from the dead. I know 6 others, 6 phantoms who the world thinks are buried, and when I call them, they're going to answer. She turned toward the door, toward the setting California sun, and the long road ahead. The question is, are you going to help me, or are you going to get in my way? Collins looked at Drake. Drake looked at Collins. In that shared glance, something passed between them, an understanding that they stood at a crossroads, that the next word spoken would set them on a path from which there was no return. Finally Collins nodded. Tell me what you need. And Ivy Harper, phantom, ghost, legend, began to plan the impossible mission that would either bring her brother home, or burn everything she'd ever known to the ground. Either way, she was done hiding. The war had just begun. The sun had begun its descent toward the Pacific, painting the Coronado sky in shades of amber and crimson. Inside Commander Collins's secure office, 3 people sat in silence, processing revelations that threatened to reshape everything they thought they knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and betrayal. Ivy Harper occupied the chair nearest the window, her torn uniform shirt replaced with a Navy training jacket. The golden trident tattoo was hidden now, but its presence lingered in the room like a silent witness. Let me make sure I understand, Collins said carefully. Sergeant First Class Noah Reeves, officially killed 3 years ago, is alive and being held in Yemen, and the people holding him are Americans. That's what he told me. And you believe him? With my life. Ivy's eyes met his without wavering. Noah and I went through selection together, survived Hell Week together. When he says something, it's truth. Drake leaned forward. Even if everything you're saying is accurate, we're talking about a conspiracy within our own military. People with enough power to fake an operator's death and keep him hidden for 3 years. That's not a rogue element. That's institutional. I know. Collins stood, moving to the window. What you're proposing isn't just a rescue mission. It's an accusation against elements of our own government. If you're wrong, you'll destroy career. If you're right, you might destroy something even bigger. The trust that operators have in the system that sends them out. Ivy rose from her chair. Commander, I've spent 3 years believing I was the only survivor of Neptune's shadow. 3 years carrying the weight of 6 deaths. Now I find out at least one teammate is alive. That someone made a deliberate choice to let me believe he was dead. Her voice hardened. That's not just conspiracy. That's betrayal. The door opened,
and a young lieutenant entered with a tablet. "Commander, the identity verification you requested." Collins scrolled through the information, his face cycling through surprise, recognition and something like awe. "Lieutenant Commander Ivy Marie Harper, 17 confirmed operation. 4 bronze stars, 2 silver stars, Purple Heart with 2 clusters." He paused. "Officially listed as killed in action, September 5th. That last part was slightly exaggerated," Ivy said dryly. "Your file is classified so high I had to go through Joint Special Operations Command for this summary." Collins shook his head. "You're not just a DEVGRU operator, you're a ghost. The government declared you dead and erased you from existence. It was necessary. After Neptune's shadow there were too many questions. It was easier to let everyone believe the whole team died than to explain why only one survived." Collins was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke carefully. "I can't authorize what you're proposing, but I can tell you that satellite monitoring for Yemen has a 40-minute gap every 18 hours. The next window is 0300 tomorrow." His expression remained neutral. "The supply depot has vehicles scheduled for maintenance that won't be missed, and Building 7 has a classified terminal with detailed information about unusual activity in Yemen's Sector 7. Drake made a sound between a cough and a laugh. "Sir, you're going to get us court-martialed. I'm going to get coffee and pretend this conversation never happened." Collins moved toward the door. "One more thing. Building 12 has a retired master sergeant named Marcus Webb, electronic warfare specialist. If someone needed surveillance disruption equipment, he'd be the person to ask." He left. Drake remained seated, studying Ivy. "You know this is probably a trap." "It could be. And you're going anyway." "I'm going anyway." Drake nodded slowly. "I have leave accumulated. 37 days. If we're doing something incredibly stupid together, you might as well call me Samuel." Ivy took his extended hand. "You don't have to do this. I've been training warriors for 25 years. Just once I'd like to do more than watch from the sidelines." His smile was tired, but genuine. "Might as well go out making a difference. First stop Tommy Reeves. He deserves to know. Then we start making calls." The other phantom. Time to wake the dead. The canteen was empty when Ivy found Tommy. He sat alone, a cup of coffee growing cold, staring at nothing. "You knew Noah," he said finally. "Not a question. I served with him. He was my second in command. And you think he's alive?" "I talked to him less than an hour ago." Tommy's head snapped up. "Where is he?" "Yemen. Some kind of black site." Ivy kept her voice low. 3 years ago, your brother and I were on a classified mission in Syria. Something went wrong. The building collapsed, and officially everyone died, me included." She let that sink in. "I survived because Noah pushed me toward an exit. I thought I was the only one who made it, but you weren't. Someone extracted Noah before the search teams arrived, transported him to Yemen." Ivy leaned forward. "The people holding him are Americans, Tommy. Our own people." The color drained from his face. "That doesn't make sense. I'm going to find out why, and I'm going to bring him home." Tears welled in Tommy's eyes. "Take me with you." "I can't. If something goes wrong you need to be here safe, ready to tell people what happened." She pulled a burner phone from her pocket. "If I don't contact you within 72 hours, call the number in this phone. It'll connect you to someone who can get the truth out." Tommy took the phone like something precious. "And if you do contact me, then I'll be bringing your brother home." Building 12 sat at the edge of the training center. Marcus Webb occupied a basement office, more electronics lab than workspace, surrounded by equipment that looked like science fiction. "Commander Collins called ahead," he said without looking up from his soldering. "Told me to expect a ghost." "Did he tell you what I need?" "Surveillance disruption. Communication dead zones." Webb finally looked up. "I've seen your file. Impressive work in North Africa. You have access to my file. I have access to a lot of things. The real question is, what are you willing to trade?" Ivy 10. "I wasn't aware this was a negotiation." "Everything's a negotiation. What I want are simple answers." He gestured to a chair. "I helped design the communication suite your team used on Neptune's shadow. The comms failure that night wasn't equipment malfunction. Someone shut you down deliberately from inside the network." The revelation hit like a physical blow. "You're saying it was intentional?" "The encryption signatures don't match any foreign service. They match our own. Webb's voice was flat. Someone with NSA-level tools killed your communications at exactly the wrong moment. I want to know who. I'll tell you what I know. But first I need those tools. Deal. He spent 2 hours walking her through his arsenal. Portable EMP devices, signal jammers, drone interceptors, and a satellite uplink that could access military networks without leaving traces. One more thing. Webb pulled out a small device. Experimental, never field-tested, biometric spoofer, feeds false data to identification systems. 97% accuracy against current military scanners. Ivy took the equipment and told him everything. The mission, the collapse, the communications blackout, Noah's phone call. When she finished, Webb sat in silence. If Noah's right about Americans running black sites and disappearing operators, we're talking about a parallel structure, he said. Something operating outside normal command channels. Any idea who's capable of that? A few. None of them good. He began typing on a tablet. I have contacts. People who owe me favors. I'll put out feelers. How long do I have? 72 hours. Maybe less. Then work fast. The calls went out over the next 6 hours, through encrypted channels established during her DEVGRU. Each call followed the same pattern. Recognition code. Brief explanation. Request for assistance. Each call was answered the same way. Yes. By midnight, 5 of 6 phantoms had confirmed. Operators who had officially died on missions spanning 3 continents, who had rebuilt lives in shadow. Marcus Chen, call sign Spectre, demolitions expert, living in Montana as a hunting guide. Sarah Blackwood, call sign Wraith, infiltration specialist, running private security operations. Jimmy O'Connell, call sign Shadow, close quarters combat legend, teaching martial arts in Virginia. Noah's best friend, Rachel Torres, call sign Widow, trauma surgeon in Chicago, her medical expertise, now saving civilian lives. Daniel Park, call sign Ghosts, cybersecurity consultant, capable of cracking any system. The 6th Phantom, Elena Vasquez, call sign Viper, had gone dark. They would proceed without her. Ivy stood on the beach behind the training center, watching waves crash against the shore. You should be sleeping. She turned to find Drake approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Couldn't. Too much happening. The others, 5 of 6 confirmed. Full team by tomorrow evening. Drake nodded, sipping his coffee. I've been thinking about parallel structures. Americans running black sites. I've seen things that don't make official reports. There's always been rumors about programs that exist outside conventional oversight. Programs like what? Operations that prioritize intelligence gathering over personnel welfare. Programs where someone might decide a compromised operative is more valuable dead than alive, or more valuable as a prisoner. Ivy's blood ran cold. You think that's what happened to Noah? He knew everything you knew. Mission parameters, intelligence sources, operational methods.
If someone wanted to extract information about DEVGRU operations without suspicion, a supposedly dead operator would be the perfect source until now. Which means whoever's holding Noah knows you're coming. That phone call was a message. They wanted you to come. I know. And I'm going anyway. Ivy faced him squarely. What choice do I have? Noah spent 2 years watching my back. He pushed me toward that exit knowing it might cost him his life. I can't leave him there, even if it's a trap. Drake reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin, worn smooth, marked with the trident of Team 7. Noah gave this to me before Neptune's shadow. Said if anything happened I should keep it until someone came looking. He pressed the coin into her palm. I think he knew that someday someone would need to find him. Ivy closed her fingers around the metal. I'm going to bring him home, whatever it takes. The team assembled in a warehouse outside San Diego. By 1600 the following day, 6 people occupied the space who officially didn't exist. Marcus Chen stood by the door, his demolitions expertise hidden beneath a wilderness guide's weathered appearance. Sarah Blackwood occupied a corner, her posture relaxed, but attention never wavering from every exit. Jimmy O'Connell sat closest to Ivy, his massive frame folded into a chair too small to support him. Noah's best friend, who had delivered the eulogy at the memorial service. Rachel Torres organized a medical station with practiced efficiency. Daniel Park worked at a laptop, satellite imagery of Yemen flickering on surrounding screens. Drake stood slightly apart, the newcomer who had earned his place through commitment. Here's what we know, Ivy began. She walked them through everything. Noah's call, the Yemen coordinates. The likelihood this was a trap. Jimmy broke the silence first. I don't care if it's a trap. Noah would walk through fire for any of us. Agreed, Chen said. But we need to be smart. If they're expecting us, we give them something unexpected. Park turned his laptop to face them. The coordinates Noah provided are in a no-fly zone, officially for military operations, but there's been no conflict there for 18 months. The restriction is cover. He pulled up enhanced satellite imagery. A compound heavily fortified. Heat signatures suggest approximately 50 personnel with a secondary structure that could be holding cells. Defense layout, Ivy asked. Perimeter security with overlapping fire. Electronic surveillance on all approaches. 2 guard towers. And here, he highlighted a section, underground facility. Climate controlled. Either a command center or detention area. What about extraction? Complicated. The compound is 47 miles from the nearest border. Helicopter extraction is out. The no-fly zone means we'd be shot down. Ground vehicles would run a gauntlet of checkpoints. Ivy studied the map. Then she saw it. What's this? She pointed to a marking at the edge. Park zoomed in. An old airstrip. Abandoned. Cold War era. How far from the compound? 12 miles northeast. Why? Ivy smiled, cold and predatory. Because we're going to fly ourselves out with the plane we steal from them. She pointed to a long, low building at the facility's edge. That's not barracks. That aspect ratio, that proximity to what looks like a paved surface. That's a hangar. Park's fingers flew across the keyboard. She's right. Thermal signature consistent with aviation fuel storage. They've got aircraft on site. A black site this remote would need rapid extraction capability, Drake said. If something went wrong, they'd need to disappear fast. We don't bring our own extraction, we take their. Ivy turned to the group. We insert at the abandoned airstrip for cover. Move on foot to the compound. Blackwood gets us through the perimeter. Chen handles hard defenses. Jimmy and I locate Noah. Torres holds reserve for medical. Park runs electronic warfare. Drake, you fly us out. Drake blinked. I haven't flown in 12 years. You qualified on 6 airframes. It's like riding a bike with jet engines. A bike that saves all our lives. Her voice softened. You're the only one with flight experience. Drake was silent. Then if I crash us into a mountain, I'm haunting all of you, noted. We have 36 hours before our window. Park, complete intelligence on the compound. Chen, breach charges. Blackwood, Torres, infiltration and medical protocols. Jimmy, I know. His voice was thick with emotion. I'll be ready. We all will because we're phantoms. We come back from the dead, and we bring our people home. The transport was arranged through channels that didn't exist. A cargo plane with a crew that asked no questions. During final briefing, Park revealed something critical. I found an encrypted communication in the compound's network. The commander is Colonel Harrison Wells, officially retired from Army intelligence 8 years ago, unofficially running black operations since Ivy's blood ran cold. I know that name. He was the intelligence officer who provided targeting data for Neptune's shadow, the man whose intelligence had positioned them for the ambush, who had assured them the building was clear. He set us up, Ivy said slowly, and now he's holding Noah. The question is why? What could be worth destroying an entire SEAL team? Ivy thought about classified operations. Intelligence gathered. Secrets carried. Then she understood. Not what Noah knows. What Noah is. Her mind raced. Noah was attached to DEVGRU for 5 years. Participated in operations across 3 continents. Knew names and faces of sources enemies would pay fortunes to identify. He's not valuable because of what he can tell them. He's valuable because of who he can identify. A living database of classified human intelligence. Exactly. Wells has been extracting that information for 3 years, selling it to whoever pays most. Ivy stood pacing. That's why he faked Noah's death. That's why Yemen instead of a domestic site. He's running a private intelligence operation. We need to inform someone. CIA, FBI. Who do we trust? Wells has operated 8 years without being caught. He has protection inside the system.
Ivy shook her head. We get Noah out, capture Wells, burn his operation to the ground. Then the world learns what kind of monster has been wearing an American uniform. 23 hours later, they were in the air. The cargo plane's interior was cramped and cold. 7 people sat in silence, lost in preparations, fears, prayers. Jimmy sat beside Ivy, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. You okay? She asked quietly. No, I keep thinking about the memorial service, the things I said about his sacrifice, and the whole time he was alive suffering, waiting. You couldn't have known. He was my partner, my brother. Jimmy finally looked at her, eyes red with unshed tears. I should have felt, but we know now, and we're making it right. And Wells answers for what he's done, one way or another. Jimmy nodded slowly. Good, because if you don't kill him, I will. The insertion went smoothly. Too smooth. They touched down on the abandoned airstrip without incident, hid their equipment, and began the 12-mile approach. By 0400, they were on a ridge overlooking the compound. Through her scope, Ivy studied the target: heavily fortified guard towers, perimeter fencing, defensive gun placements, personnel moving between structures with predictable patrol rhythms, guard rotation every 45 minutes. Blackwood murmured. 8 external positions, probably twice that inside. Hangars on the far side. 2 aircraft. Can you get us through? Eastern perimeter. 30-second blind spot between tower sightlines. Tight, but doable. Ivy keyed her radio. All units, final positions. Blackwood moves on my signal. Chen, stand by for breach. Phantom. Park's voice crackled. Unusual communication traffic. Encrypted, but the pattern suggests they know we're coming. Expected. Proceed as planned. Start electronic warfare in 30 seconds. She counted down. 30, 20, 10. Park's jamming signal went active. The compound's communications died. Go. They moved like shadows, flowing down the ridge toward the perimeter, reached the fence at exactly the moment guard towers lost their angle. Blackwood's cutters made short work of the wire. No alarms, no gunfire, just eerie silence. Too easy, Jimmy whispered. Stay sharp. The entrance was guarded by 2 personnel who never knew what hit them. Jimmy's skills dropped them without a sound. They descended into the facility. The underground structure was larger than surface buildings suggested. Sprawling corridors and chambers built to last, to house operations requiring absolute secrecy. Contact left. Blackwood hissed. A patrol emerged. The firefight was brief and brutal. When it ended, an alarm was blaring. So much for stealth, Jimmy muttered. Plan B. Ivy keyed her radio. Chin, initiate surface breach. Drake, get to those aircraft. Above them, explosions rocked the compound. The diversion would draw defenders topside. This way Ivy led them deeper, following Park's layout. The detention area should be at the corridor's end, behind a reinforced door. They encountered more resistance. Guards positioned in choke points, suggesting tactical training and advanced knowledge. The Phantoms fought through, took wounds, kept moving. Finally they reached the door. Sealed, Blackwood reported. Electronic and mechanical, going to take time. We don't have time. Jimmy stepped forward. Stand back. He hit the door with his shoulder. Steel screamed. Again, again. On the 4th impact, hinges gave way. Behind it was a cell, and strapped to a chair bolted to the floor was Noah Reeves. He looked like a ghost. Gaunt, pale, haunted eyes of someone who had endured things that defied description, but alive. Hey Jimmy. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Took you long enough. Jimmy made a sound, half sob, half laugh. You're an idiot for not dying properly. Tried, didn't take. Noah's eyes found Ivy. Commander, I knew you'd come. Always. She examined his restraints. Can you walk? After some encouragement, Torres arrived to assess his condition. Dehydration, malnutrition, signs of extensive interrogation, but nothing immediately life-threatening. Wells, Noah said as they helped him up. He's here in the command center. I know, he's got files. Everything he's done, everyone he's sold to. 3 years of intelligence operations. We'll get the files first. We get you out. No, listen. Noah grabbed her arm. This whole thing, the phone call, letting you find me. It's his plan. He wants you here. Why? Because you're the last loose end. Everyone from Neptune's shadow is officially dead. But you survived. You escaped. His eyes were desperate. As long as you're alive, you're a threat. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a trap to recapture prisoner. This was elimination. Wells tying up loose ends. Then let's make sure he fails. Everyone rally at the hangar. The explosion came from below. The floor shook. Walls cracked. Dust billowed. Demolition charges. Noah said, face white. He's bringing down the building. If he can't capture us, he'll bury us. Move. Now. They ran, dragging Noah, fighting through dust and debris, and occasional guards. They clawed toward the surface. The facility groaned. Support structures failing. Ceilings collapsing. They emerged into chaos. The compound burning. Defenders scattered. Through smoke and fire, Ivy saw the hangar intact. Drake standing beside an aircraft spinning up. There. Go. They sprinted across open ground. Bullets cracking past. Chen provided covering fire. Blackwood took a round in the shoulder. Jimmy carried Noah the final 100 meters. They reached the aircraft. Twin-engine transport, capable of reaching friendly territory. Everyone in. 60 seconds. They piled through the cargo door. Torres went to work on Blackwood. Chen was last aboard, laying final suppressive fire. The engines roared. The aircraft lurched forward. Through the cockpit window, Ivy saw him. Harrison Wells stood at the compound's edge, watching them escape. He made no move to stop them. He simply stood there, perfectly calm amid destruction. And as they lifted off, Wells smiled. He held up a phone, making a call. Ivy. Noah's voice was weak, but urgent. There's something else. What? The conspiracy. It's not just Wells. It's not just this facility. He struggled to sit up. It goes all the way to the top. Pentagon? Intelligence agencies. How high? Noah's answer chilled her. High enough that they knew we were coming before we left California. High enough that they let us rescue me on purpose. She understood then. They hadn't escaped. They hadn't won. They'd done exactly what Wells wanted. Gathered every surviving phantom in one place. Exposed their network. Their methods. They hadn't rescued Noah. They had delivered themselves into a trap, only beginning to close. Everyone listen carefully, Ivy said over the engine noise. When we land, we can't go to any military installation. We can't trust any official channel. Whoever Wells is part of, they know who we are now. Where do we go? Drake asked. Ivy thought of the challenge coin, of Tommy waiting for news, of Marcus Webb, of allies gathered and enemies made. We go underground, disappear, then we start taking this conspiracy apart, piece by piece. That could take years, Chen said. Then it takes years. We've already come back from the dead once. We can do it again. Noah gripped her hand. Whatever happens, Commander, thank you for not giving up. We don't leave anyone behind. The aircraft flew east toward the rising sun, toward an uncertain future of shadows and conspiracies. Behind them, the burning compound collapsed, burying Wells's secrets, but not the man himself, who had slipped away to fight another day. It wasn't victory. It wasn't defeat. It was the beginning of a war that would test everything they believed in. But as Ivy watched desert give way to ocean, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. She had her team, her brothers in arms, a mission that finally made sense. Find the truth, expose the conspiracy, bring the guilty to justice, never stop fighting. The aircraft banked toward friendly territory, and Ivy Harper, phantom, ghost, legend, allowed herself a small smile. Looks like I'm not the only ghost who came back from the dead. Somewhere Harrison Wells was making plans of his own. The game was only beginning. This is Open Mysteries. Who else sits atop Wells's conspiracy? How high does corruption reach? What happened to Elena Vasquez, Viper, the sixth phantom who went dark 18 months ago? What intelligence did Wells extract from Noah? And how much damage was done? Why did Wells allow them to escape? What larger plan does the rescue serve? Who inside the military knew the phantoms were coming before they left California? What is the true purpose of the network Wells serves? Tendrils reaching into the highest levels of American power. The answers waited in shadows, and the phantoms would find them no matter the cost.